Welcome to Resilient. I'm Lori Lorenzo, Deloitte's Research and Insights Director for our Chief Legal Officer program and host of the Resilient Chief Legal Officer track. Curiosity, patience, change. In this episode, Lanesha Minnix, Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary at Ecolab Inc., shares how these values have allowed her to build a successful legal career across various industries. Lanesha also discusses how she motivates her team to be business partners and her passion for mentoring young lawyers and advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the legal profession. Let's hear what Lanesha has to say. Lanesha, welcome to the Resilient Podcast Show. I'm really excited to have you as my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, me too. Primarily because I have been thinking a lot about your career trajectory. And when we prepped, talking about your early childhood influences and the way they have shaped and molded the CLO that you are today. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to share that story with our audience. So maybe let's start at the beginning. Talk to me a little bit about what childhood was like for you. Tell me about your parents, some of the early influences.
Absolutely. I love talking about my upbringing and my family because, as you mentioned, Lori, it's so fundamental to who I am, both as a lawyer and as a leader. And I know we'll get into that in more detail. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Deeply religious, very deeply values-driven, pretty big family. My father was the oldest of 9 children, and we're very close extended family. My dad was really just recently retired as a Baptist minister, and my mom was a proud first lady of a church. And so a lot of my upbringing was really grounded in values, the importance of family, and importantly, the ability and willingness to make an impact in the world through service to others and doing your part in the community to really contribute. And so that is how I grew up. My mother and father both taught me the value of work ethic, the importance of education. I grew up in a very modest socioeconomic environment. And so, my parents really fundamentally believe that the path to financial well-being was through education. I actually agree with that. And I think that's right. And it can be a differentiator and a way to build community. And so that's just sort of grounds how I see the world, how I think about the world, and how I approach almost everything that I do.
Lanesha, you said your dad was one of 9 children. Was your sibling set equally large?
No, ironically enough, I come from a family of 3 girls. I'm the oldest, and I have 2 sisters. And so we are not quite as big, but ironically, because my dad was the oldest, his younger siblings were closer in age to me. And so I have uncles and aunts that are fairly close in age to me. So while I only have 2 technical siblings, I feel like I have more because I spent just as much time with my uncles and aunts as I did with my siblings.
Oh, got it. And you said your parents were really focused on education as a means of elevating one's position. So what did that look like in high school? Were you constant studier? Were you into sports and extracurriculars along with the academics?
Yeah, so I was fairly studious in high school and in college. I'm happy that I was. I'll tell you that sometimes I did feel like I missed a lot of the fun of those. And so it's interesting now as a mother, I try to help my children balance both succeeding academically, but also the importance of enjoying life and having fun as a kid, because you really only get that once. But yes, fairly studious, fairly driven. And I think that sort of played out throughout my entire life. But I was also very active. So again, going back to this contributing to the broader community, I did a lot of community service work. I volunteered at a hospital where my mother worked for a number of years as what we called then a candy striper. I volunteered at various organizations that my parents were involved in or that I had an affinity for. So that drive for supporting the community has always been with me from an early age.
So is that where the desire to become a lawyer came from, an interest in serving the community, or was there some other driver?
I get this question often, and I don't know that I can recall why I was so driven to be a lawyer. What I can tell you is that I felt that desire very, very early in life, like even before high school. And I think maybe part of it was, there weren't a lot of professionals. It was a very working class community, very proud community, but certainly I didn't know any lawyers. I didn't know really any doctors. My mother was really, really pushing me to be an engineer because I had strong math acumen. I knew I didn't want to do that because I hated science. But I thought, maybe being a lawyer, there's some way from a business perspective that I can use those math skills differently. So anyway, very, very early on, but I can't tell you it's because I actually knew what a lawyer did at the time.
Yeah, I didn't either. When I was setting my sights on becoming a lawyer, I really only thought there were litigators.
Right.
And so, did you ultimately end up using that math acumen in your law practice? I mean, did they intersect in the way you expected?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I fundamentally believe that the best, particularly in-house lawyers, are lawyers that understand the business performance of their company and have financial acumen, which in a large part is math, right? And so in undergrad, I was actually a business major, and then I actually got my MBA when I was at law school. And so for me, it's been very helpful to have that skill to be able to read financial statements, to be able to understand a P&L, and to be able to speak in terms of financial performance is really, really helpful for a lawyer.
And your interest in business in law school was influenced by a scholarship you got, right?
Absolutely.
Will you tell us a little more about that scholarship and how it molded you towards a career in-house?
It was very instrumental in my decision to ultimately pursue an in-house career. So I went to the University of Tulsa Law School in part because I'm from Tulsa, and they had a fairly new program where they gave a scholarship to a law student, and with the scholarship you received an internship at a local, one of the largest public companies in Tulsa at the time. And so I got that scholarship. And so I did the internship. And as part of the internship, I got exposure to lawyers from various levels within the organization and was very fortunate to strike a mentorship relationship with the then general counsel. And he was very influential in helping me understand what it meant to be an in-house lawyer, why that role could be so valuable to a company more broadly, and why it was a fun role. And that actually was the first time where I thought, you know what, I might actually want to do what he does someday because it seemed very interesting to me.
And the work that you were doing in that internship, was it integrating the business acumen? Is that part of why you got the MBA?
I knew that I wanted to do something with business, even in undergrad. And I thought, I already have a business degree. I certainly knew once I got out of law school, there was no way you were going to get me back to school. So I thought, you know what, let me just get this while I'm here. And I'm already kind of head down and focused academically. And it was sort of like luck almost that I ended up doing that. But yeah, I mean, the actual day to day of seeing lawyers sitting in with business leaders and talking about potential M&A deal and how it drives growth for the business, or how the company is trying to grow organically through its existing offerings and customer base. I mean, they were really kind of scintillating conversations. And I never would have thought, oh, wow, a lawyer can sit in on these conversations and actually contribute in a meaningful way as you're thinking about risk and, managing those risks in conjunction with helping a business perform. So it was actually really cool to me to see that kind of new side that I never envisioned.
Yeah, and so you were in law school with this generous scholarship and the opportunity to intern in a position that not many law students get to see. And you come to graduation, and I think you had a choice, right? Were you going to go into a law firm or to the offer that you did ultimately get from that company that sponsored the scholarship and the internship? How did you make that choice?
I was really leaning towards the in-house role. It was a role that sounded very interesting to me. It developed some really good working relationships and friendships, and I wanted to retain that. But ultimately, that same mentor who was a general counsel really encouraged me to consider going to private practice. And he had a number of reasons why he suggested it. Ultimately, I think the most fundamental reason was law firms, as he put it, are just extraordinarily skilled at training junior lawyers on how to be good lawyers. And not that in-house departments aren't set up for that, but most in-house departments really leverage existing expertise and know-how, and they're not really set up to train junior lawyers. There are some that do it well, but for the most part, you're better served going to a private practice. And so he really encouraged me. He said, look, you can always come in-house from a law firm. It is much more difficult to go from an in-house role back to a law firm, and the experience you're going to get with partners actually sitting down with you and reviewing your memos and marking them up, and then having you go back again and rewrite it, or doing due diligence on a deal so you can fundamentally understand how these deals work. That experience you're going to only get at a private law firm. And so that's what ultimately made me choose to go to a law firm first.
Yeah, and before we talk about that experience, I have two follow-up questions. The first one is, I guess I'm imagining myself as a law student in an in-house role, and I might have been intimidated by the general counsel. But it sounds like you developed a really strong mentorship relationship. What do you think it was about you or about that general counsel or the situation that motivated or inspired that general counsel to invest in you and your success?
I wish I could say there was something so brilliant that I did that would make him take interest in me. I think it's probably twofold, right? A mentoring relationship has two parties to it. I think I was willing to listen and learn and be interested in what information he had to share. But I think he also was interested in developing the next generation of leadership. And for whatever reason, perhaps he saw something in me that he thought the investment of time was worth it. And I'm fortunate and lucky that he did. And I certainly use that, and I think about and reflect on that often in my role today, because I want to do something very similar for the next generation of leadership behind me.
Relative to that decision-making process, law firm versus in-house, do you think the advice you got then is still relevant today? I think that the data for law school graduates is evolving, and more graduates are going into business roles or in-house roles than was true maybe 10 and certainly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you, from your seat as a CLO, see the same benefit of going to a law firm first, or if there is some new reason or circumstance that might make in-house as a first job a more attractive option these days.
Great point, Lori. And I'll tell you, I don't subscribe to there's a one size fits all model. I really think it depends on the circumstances, the situation, and frankly, the individual and what they're interested in. I still fundamentally believe that if it works for your lifestyle, your family situation, and what you want to do long term, that there is no better experience than going to a law firm for some period of time. They just really have a honed in, exemplary way of training junior lawyers. And I've been in a number of companies in their in-house departments. I have not seen that replicated in the way that a law firm, if done right by a law firm, it can't be mirrored. That being said, I do think you're right. I mean, one, law firms are good on talent, but sometimes there is a life work balance issue, and it's hard to get younger lawyers to want to commit to doing what I think some law firms may want you to do. And I do think equally, in-house departments have gotten far better at focusing on training more junior lawyers. So whether it's junior lawyers that are coming in after a few years at a law firm, or junior lawyers coming in right out of law school. And so I think with the right leadership approach of the leadership in-house and the right attitude of a junior lawyer, you can absolutely be successful going straight in-house.
Yeah, so going straight in-house, if I'm hearing you correctly, might just require that you take a little more ownership over your development than in a law firm scenario where it's more of a prescribed development experience.
Absolutely. One of my in-house roles many years ago was at a fairly large global legal in-house department with 600-700 lawyers, and they were incredibly good at training junior lawyers, whether those junior lawyers were coming in after a few years at a law firm or coming in right out of law school. And they actually had a program, and they did, I think, a best-in-class job of doing that. But there was commitment from the leadership to train lawyers and to give them rounding and experience. But to your point, there was also a commitment from these junior lawyers that they had to be willing to build those relationships so that they could get the right training. They had to be willing to learn in a somewhat of a unique or a different environment. But it was very, very successful.
Maybe let's talk a little bit about the decision-making process that you went through when you decided that you had gotten the experience you wanted from a law firm and you were ready to think about going back in-house. How did you approach that decision-making, and what were some of the factors you were weighing?
Yeah, so I have to admit I've been very, very fortunate in my career, even from early on in my career, that I never actually had to proactively look for a new role. I know that seems sort of funny to say that, but I seem to get calls at the right time and a logical time for a transition in my career. And so in this case, I was at a law firm. I had 4 years of experience, had led a number of deals, had gotten very, very good experience. And I got a call to join the in-house legal department at Sprint in Kansas City. Obviously, Sprint's a very well-known company, very, good legal department. I'd heard and read a lot of good things about their general counsel and their leadership team. And so it was exciting to me. And so part of, why I was willing to make the move is because it was the company, what the company did, and how I thought I could contribute to what it was they were achieving or trying to achieve. And so it just made sense for me. And then the role was a completely different role than what I had done before. And part of what I really like and find exciting is the ability to learn new things in new areas. That's one of the things that gets me out of bed every morning. And so this role was a commercial role, an opportunity to be customer facing, which I had never had the opportunity to do. And so it was exciting on a number of levels for that reason.
Yeah, let's talk for a minute about those phone calls because I think many of us get them unsolicited. And today, maybe they're phone calls or emails or outreach on social media platforms. Do you have a general perspective on those? For one, entertain every conversation because I want to know what the market looks like. And in some cases, I can recommend my friends and colleagues who may be in a different position or looking for different opportunities. But I think it's important to stay educated about what's out there and what people are looking for at different levels of experience. What do you think about those phone calls or those opportunities to have conversations?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. And I'll tell you the answer I would have given you 5 years ago is going to be different than today, knowing that I lead a department and I don't want my team leaving and I don't want them taking those phone calls. But I think the reality is looking at external opportunities and taking those calls can be distracting. And so I've always said I don't typically take the phone calls for the purposes of myself. I do agree with you that I also believe that part of our role is to help lift others up and to stay connected within the legal profession and to help others. And so if and when I get phone calls, I always try to give them a relevant name or two as a referral, but I generally do not take the phone calls unless they fit within a very specific framework.
Yeah. And so you said that you were fortunate that the recruiter called about the opportunity at Sprint, but was it just that the opportunity at Sprint seemed really exciting, or were you at a place at the firm where you felt like you had learned what you needed to know? Or maybe it was something in your personal life where you thought it was time to make a transition that was more aligned to, how you wanted to spend your time outside of work?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it actually, ironically, is a combination of all of those, Lori. I had a great experience at the law firm 4 years in, but I was certainly mid associate level and knew that the partnership would be itching to say, do you want to be a partner? And I certainly knew that wasn't something that I was interested in. The Sprint role sounded very exciting. I knew they had a large legal department with opportunities to do lots of different things. And so as I thought about my career path, and I'm a big proponent of you own your own career, I could see opportunities to do other things in addition to what I was doing or what I was being asked to do when I came in. And it actually worked out that way because I went in and I started out, negotiating B2B, what they call enterprise customer agreements, and then ended up, working in our mobile virtual network operating business unit and became like a GC of a division. And so I had several different opportunities within Sprint, which is exactly what I wanted. I'd say the other thing is I was a young mother. And, the life at a law firm sometimes, particularly when you're doing transactions, can be quite time consuming. So I was looking for a little bit of a shift in the work-life balance because my children, or my one daughter at the time, was still young.
It sounds like you got lots of interesting experiences at Sprint, and you said it was a really large in-house function, which makes sense in its ability to provide those experiences. How did you know when it was time to leave Sprint for something else? And as part of that, your career trajectory has spanned several different industries.
Yeah.
So, was that part of the decision making process as you moved roles, thinking about different industries and what those meant to the learning curve or ability to adapt?
Yeah, I would say that if you looked at my career, it looks very thoughtful. And I wish I could say that it was because I was just so planful in the way I thought about it. And the reality is, a lot of these opportunities, it was sort of dropped in my lap and I seized them. And that's one of the things that I tell people often is when opportunities present themselves that absolutely make sense, you've got to be willing to take that risk on yourself. And so for me, it was a great opportunity to move to one of the largest global companies in the world. I went to Shell. The idea of living in Houston, Texas sounded exciting to me, and the role sounded exciting to me. And again, very much like Sprint, Shell had a massive global legal department, and I knew I would have opportunities to potentially do a lot of different things. So that's what interested me in taking the move.
And was Houston your first move outside of the immediate proximity of mom and dad and siblings and cousins?
No, my law firm job was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I tell my team often I've been willing to move for my career. I started in Pittsburgh, then Kansas City, and then Houston. Kansas City was definitely the closest that I've ever been to home in my career, which was nice.
You mentioned having young kids, and I know at some point in the story, although we didn't stop for that moment, you got married.
Yes.
And how has that influenced your husband's career?
It's interesting because my husband has a career as well, and it's something that we spend a lot of time talking about. And sometimes he's on deck and sometimes I'm on deck, but we very much view our lives as a partnership, and it works for us. But yeah, it's not without its challenges, but we're both very supportive of what we're trying to achieve in our careers.
Yeah, I'm finding as I interact with more early career professionals that navigating the dual career and the potential for movement, the generation early in their career right now has this, I don't know if it's an ability or an expectation that they can be geographically anywhere is really hard on dual career families. And so thinking about navigating that in the context of this partnership of relationship or partner, it's a difficult
It
question.
is. And one thing that I tell people often is that, you can't use someone else's circumstances to inform yours. Everyone's family situation, needs, relationships are different. My husband commuted for 3 years between Los Angeles and Dallas, and it worked for us because our kids were older. It would have been much more difficult to do that if we had, babies or younger school age children, but we were able to make that work, for the time. And so I have a daughter that's finishing high school in Texas. This role at Ecolab, which I was super excited about, became available. And we agreed as a family that it was absolutely the right thing to do for our family and for my career. And so I'm commuting for now between Dallas and Minneapolis because she needs to finish high school. And once she finishes high school, my husband will relocate. If it works for your situation, I tell people, you've got to have some creativity and some flexibility to be able to maneuver. And again, it doesn't work for everyone. It worked for us just because of our circumstances. But yeah, it doesn't mean that it's easy.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that because I agree with you. The family dynamic is so individual, but it's nice to hear how other people have navigated it, if for no other reason than to spark ideation, right?
Right.
Maybe we can consider that. Well, that's something we hadn't thought about. Any of the other maybe tips or tricks for raising kids during an active law practice and a journey to chief legal officer?
Yeah, I don't, you may want to ask my children. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I get it right on motherhood, and sometimes I think I don't. I think on the whole, my daughters would say that I've gotten it right more than I've gotten it wrong. One of the things that I have daughters, right? They're proud to see their mother going after what she wants for her career and being a leader and making an impact on the world. And not that, staying at home is not impact, because that's obviously very, very important. I have the mommy guilt. I won't say that I don't. And I certainly am always trying to balance showing up and being there for my family, but also being high performing at work. But I think overall, they've been very proud of what I've achieved. And I think it's helped them and with their ambition and doing what they want to achieve, and showing them that you can have a family and have a career if you want one.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that mommy guilt. But I will say my oldest daughter is 21. And when she was 15 or 16, there was a lot of you travel a lot, or, I'm mad that you missed my lacrosse game or whatever was going on. At 21, though, she is starting to say things like, I learned how to do this from you, or I had a good example. And man, that is a nice change of circumstance.
Exactly.
Um, and maybe let's go back to your trajectory. So from the firm to Sprint to Shell,
Mm-hmm.
and then there were a couple other stops, right, where you picked up titles like Chief Compliance Officer, Corporate Secretary,
Yep.
General Counsel, to today, Chief Legal Officer at Ecolab.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about the lessons learned along that journey and how they've shaped your leadership perspective as the chief legal officer of a legal function at a really big company.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, Lori, I've been very fortunate that I've worked in a number of different in-house legal departments. I've had responsibility for a variety of different areas, and you've laid them out, but everything from compliance to litigation to commercial law, to governance and corporate secretary work. And I actually think it's been very, very helpful for me with my team, because I can, interact with them in a way where I can help them, but also it gives me credibility. When my compliance team is dealing with challenges, I can reflect back on my experience and say, I understand what you're going through. And maybe it's not the exact same circumstances, but it's something similar. And I think that helps. I've also seen what, a lot of what I think good looks like, either from a leadership perspective or a cultural perspective. And I've taken note of all of those various strengths and benefits at every step. And I fundamentally believe that's part of what has shaped who I am as a leader and what I believe in managing my team. And so I want to say that I've taken the good in all of the places that I've been at, and sort of left the not so good behind. Hopefully it's a great, mixture of a lot of good things that I can bring to my role now.
And so, if someone were joining your legal function, what advice would you give them on being successful on your team?
Yeah, so it's a great question, because we are recruiting for several roles, and so this will give me an opportunity to hone my elevator pitch. So part of the reason why I'm at Ecolab is because I just fundamentally love what this company does and the purpose that we have and who we are more broadly from an impact perspective on the world. But what I tell lawyers when they're considering coming to work here is that you have to be willing to be more than just a lawyer. Not that lawyers are a dime a dozen, because I don't believe that, but equally, just having good legal skills is not enough, at least not in this department. Our business leaders expect partnership. They expect functional leaders that understand their challenges, that understand what we're trying to achieve as a company, and they understand fundamentally what we're trying to do for our customers. And so, to be successful as an in-house lawyer, you have to be willing to not only opine on the legal issues, but you also have to be willing to partner on business issues and help solve business problems. And I'd say that is fundamentally the most important skill. And there are some lawyers that are just not interested in that, right? And they want to talk about legal issues only. And what I tell people is, if that is the practice that you want, I think that's great, but this legal department is not the place for you. But if you, want to help support a growing, thriving business, if you want to help support our customers, if you want to really be part and parcel of a business, then absolutely this is a place for you.
And how do you get your teams to do that? Because this idea that lawyers should have a business orientation, they need to really enable business, is not historic. It's relatively new.
Right.
And so, as a CLO in your last role in the CLO here, I imagine there have been moments when you have come across lawyers that say, no, I didn't go to law school to do that. I went to law school to be X kind of lawyer and I'm going to be X kind of lawyer. And as a leader in that situation, how do you encourage your teams to evolve their perspective on what it means to serve the business
Yeah.
and protect the business?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And you're right. This is more of an emerging phenomenon, but one that I certainly, subscribe to. I start with the broader purpose and strategy of the business. And so I'll give you an example for Ecolab. Our purpose is our strategic ambition. And so we want to make the world cleaner, safer, and healthier by protecting people and resources that are vital to life. And so I literally, with my team, I start with that. And what I say to them is, we are not here to be lawyers. We're here to enable our company to do that for the broader world. And then sort of take it the step further. What does that mean for our team? If Ecolab, that's our purpose and that's what we're trying to achieve for the world, what's our part in making that, come to life? And how is it what we do every single day? How can we impact that? Whether it's negotiating commercial contracts with our customers so that they get the best outcomes possible, or if it's, looking at a new product offering and making sure that we have the right intellectual property protections around it, or if it's, a new offering and we are trying to do marketing around it and making sure that we can do it in a compliant way. But everything that we do every single day is tied to that. And so, yes, you're a lawyer, but you're also part of a broader ecosystem that we call Ecolab. And so if we want to be successful, we have to connect those.
I think this connection to mission and purpose is really critical, right? We're not just here to write contracts. We're not just here to engage in litigation or defend against litigation, but for the greater good of perpetuating the mission of whichever organization you happen to work for.
That's right.
Speaking of new orientations within legal functions or new ways of thinking about how the legal function serves its clients, what are you thinking or doing in the area of technology?
We are in the throes of technology deployments as we speak, and I know a lot of legal departments are as well. I would say a number of functions are more mature than legal functions in their digital and technology adoption. And I always make the joke that the legal department's like the last frontier, right? HR implemented technology to enhance their work years ago, the finance teams years ago. And the legal departments are sort of like trying to catch up, right? And so whether it's contract management systems or the use of AI to look at contract language or, dashboards. And so we are certainly looking at that within Ecolab. We're about to deploy a document management system, which I know the team is very, very excited about as a knowledge management tool for our team, and everyone's excited about that. But yes, I mean, we are certainly in the throes of, leveraging digital capabilities really to make our teams and elevate the value of the work that they do. And I think the lawyers are very excited about that. But it's also, there's change related to that, right? It's different, and it's involving new muscles that people haven't had to use before.
Mm-hmm. And so within that process, what would you say has been the best value or outcome you've seen, and what's been the most challenging part of making that change?
Yeah, I think starting with the why, right? Because with change, everyone is nervous about change, right? That's just hard. And like I've always done something this way. And I think the important key is explaining to people why the change is beneficial, not only for the team, but for them personally, right? So the quintessential what's in it for me. And so what I've seen work tremendously well is sharing with people why this is going to be beneficial for them. The challenge, of course, is that, if people can't see that, you can sometimes get resistance, and you have to help people see the benefit and go on the journey and ask them to go on the journey with you. And typically, if you do that, they'll trust you. If you say to them, we're going to give you the freedom to tell us what is working and what isn't working, and we will always be willing to make changes in the spirit of continuous improvement. And I think just having that willingness and that flexibility gives people much more comfort that they can adopt or engage on the process.
Yeah, and the space to learn and grow, right?
Right.
And to know they don't have to be perfect at it, but together we're going to get to whatever the desired end state is.
That's right.
I want to circle back to what you said about growing up and the way your parents framed contribution to community and purpose. We've talked a lot about connecting our work as lawyers to purpose, but
Hmm.
I want to take a minute to talk to you about that sense of community and contribution. And we said earlier, maybe that wasn't what drove your desire to become a lawyer, but does it inform some of what you do today? I mean, are you engaged in activities or nonprofits outside of your 9 to 5? And what are those and why are you passionate about them?
Yeah, I am actually. And so I spend a lot of time supporting community organizations that align with my own personal passions. I really am passionate about progressing diversity, equity, and inclusion within the legal profession. And I believe that we've made a tremendous amount of progress over the last several decades, but we still have a lot of progress that we need to make. And I want to leverage the voice that I have in order to progress that. And so I mentor and sponsor diverse professionals in the legal space. I'm on a nonprofit board called Minority Corporate Counsel Association, whose sole purpose is to progress DE&I in the legal profession. And then outside of that, more broadly, I'm very passionate about progressing girls and women globally around the world. And so I've been on boards like the Girl Scouts and other organizations. And so, I'd say those two areas are two of the areas that I'm particularly passionate about and spend my free time volunteering around.
I love that. If you were to give some advice to a CLO who was thinking about how they could incorporate DEI into their strategic planning or their leadership style or women's issues or equity, what advice would you give them in being thoughtful or intentional about those issues as a chief legal officer?
Yeah, what I'd say to people is that DE&I is easier than you may think if you're intentional about it. And let me tell you what I mean by that. You've got to be willing to build diverse teams, but it's not just representation and diversity in and of itself. You need the inclusion part, and that's what really is important. And so, often I have conversations with other GCs and we sort of talk about this. I don't think it's this silver bullet of like, if we do X, Y, or Z, it's going to solve the problems. It's, leaders really being intentional about I need a diverse team because it makes our team better and it lends itself for better results. But I'm only going to get that benefit if I'm inclusive as well. And so what that means is every single person on your team, irrespective of, their background, that they feel empowered, they feel engaged, and they feel included. And so part of what I spend a lot of time doing is just being intentional about, am I hearing all of the, diverse views of my team as part of my decision making? And so sometimes it's just as simple as that, but also just really committing to the importance of it. And so that may be leveraging your voice with external law firms and sharing with them why DE&I is important to you so that it becomes or remains important to them because they know it's important to their customers. So there's a lot of ways that I think you can focus on DE&I, and it really is just about committing to it and figuring out what that looks like for you and for your department.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of support out there, in particular in the legal profession and organizations like MCCA and others that leaders can turn to for support and resources in that journey.
Absolutely.
Lanesha, I want to look forward. What are you excited about in the next, let's say, 5 years, either for yourself, your legal function, or the legal profession generally?
Well, it's interesting. We've come out of 3 years of really, really challenging times to be, frankly, working, to be a leader, to be in the legal profession, dealing with COVID, a war in Russia, Ukraine, supply chain issues, inflation, just you name it. We've had a really tough slog for the last 3 years. And I'd say what I'm most excited about is just looking forward. We're starting, I think, to I almost feel like I should knock on wood when I say it, but come into a place where I think we can now start to look up and see some light at the end of the tunnel. I'm really excited about the next generation of leaders. I spend a lot of time with younger lawyers and, some very talented, capable people that I think are going to be great in-house leaders. And so I'm really excited to work with them and to support them. And I fundamentally believe that from a DE&I perspective, we're on the right track. And I'm excited to see how we progress in the legal profession on that as well.
Lots to look forward to.
I'm very optimistic, Lori.
I love it. I love it. I'm right there with you in terms of optimism, in particular in the areas of DEI and the continued progress we can make. And I'm hopeful, like you are, that maybe we can all take a breath sometime soon.
Yes.
And maybe slow down just a little bit.
Indeed.
Lanesha, I can't thank you enough for spending time with me today and talking about your story and your influences and what you're excited about and how you lead your teams. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me, Lori. Enjoyed the conversation.
Lanesha, thank you so much for sharing your inspiring stories about your upbringing, your early mentor, and how your family helped to shape your career journey. It's been enlightening to hear your perspectives on helping your team members grow beyond their comfort zone and being intentional about implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. We've covered a lot on today's episode, and if you want to know more about the Chief Legal Officer's role and many perspectives across legal leadership, visit us on Deloitte.com and search Chief Legal Officer. Do you want to hear from other legal leaders? What can we bring you next? Please share your feedback. We really want to hear from you about topics and leaders of interest. Hit me up on LinkedIn to share your ideas, or for more insights from many iconic and resilient leaders, just go to Deloitte.com/US/resilient. Until next time, remain resilient.